Hello everyone. Today, let us study thrombosis together. First, let us briefly review the physiological process of normal hemostasis, which you should have already studied in physiology course. Hemostasis is a normal, rapid formation of a localized plaque at the site of vascular injury after the initial endothelial injury. The first event is transient arteriolar vasoconstriction as a result of reflex neurogenic mechanisms. Since endothelial injury exposes the subendothelial extracellular matrix to blood flow, platelets in circulation adhere to the sites of injury and are activated. Activated platelets undergoes a dramatic shape change, and they further recruit additional platelet to the site of injury, where release of secretory granules. This process is known as primary hemostasis. Tissue factor is also exposed at the site of injury. This initiates the coagulation cascade, eventually culminating in thrombin generation. Thrombin cleaves circulating fibrinogen into insoluble fibrin, which creates a fibrin meshwork deposition. This process is named as secondary hemostasis. Polymerized fibrin and platelet aggregates together form a solid permanent plaque to prevent further hemorrhage. At this stage, the counterregulatory mechanisms are also set into motion to prevent the overactivation of hemostasis mechanisms. Under normal condition, blood is maintained in a fluid, clot-free state in normal vessels. Once injuries take place in blood vessels, there is a localized hemostatic plaque formed rapidly at the site of injury to prevent hemorrhage. And normal hemostasis is a precisely regulated physiological process. The pathologic version of hemostasis is thrombosis. Thrombosis refers to the pathologic formation of a solid mass, or in other words, blood clot, from the constituent of blood within the non-interrupted heart or vascular system in a living host. And the blood clot formed in heart or vascular system is termed as thrombus. Thrombosis is a process of thrombus formation, and thrombus is a product of thrombosis process. There are three primary influences on thrombus formation called virtuous triad, namely endothelial injury, alteration in normal blood flow, and blood hypercoagulability. Next, we will introduce these three factors one by one. The first factor is endothelial injury. Endothelial injury is a dominant influence, since endothelial loss by itself can lead to thrombosis. Endothelial injury is particularly important for thrombus formation in heart or in arterial circulation. Physical loss of endothelium further leads to the exposure of subendothelial ECM, adhesion of platelet to ECM, and local release of tissue factor, therefore initiating thrombus formation. But it is also important to note that endothelial injury need not to be physical. Dysfunctional endothelium under certain conditions, for example, under hemodynamic stress caused by hypertension, can also lead to the imbalance of prothrombotic and antithrombotic activities, and eventually results in thrombus formation. The second factor in thrombus formation is alterations in normal blood flow. Under normal condition, blood flow is laminar, in which platelets in axial flow are separated from the endothelium by plasma in the edge flow, and there is little chance for platelets to attach to the blood vessel wall and accumulate. Both turbulence and stasis in blood flow can bring platelet into contact with endothelium, and they also prevent the dilution of activated clotting factors by fresh flowing blood. Turbulence in the heart or arterial system can also lead to endothelial injury or dysfunction, which initiates thrombus formation. Turbulence mainly contributes to arterial and cardiac thrombosis, whereas stasis is a major contributor to the development of venous thrombi. The last factor of thrombosis is blood hypercoagulability. Generally speaking, hypercoagulability contributes less frequently to thrombotic states, comparing to endothelial injury and blood flow alterations. But it is nevertheless a significant component. Hypercoagulable state can be further categorized into primary ones and secondary ones. Among the genetic cause of hypercoagulability, mutations in factor V gene and prothrombin gene are most common. Pathogenesis of acquired hypercoagulability is usually multifactorial and therefore more complicated. For instance, both oral contraceptive use and hyperestrogenic state of pregnancy related to hypercoagulable state. Having discussed the factor of thrombus formation, let us turn our attention to the morphology of thrombus. Typically, thrombi developed in heart chamber or aorta can have apparent laminations called lines of Zahn. In the thrombus, pale platelet and fibrin layers, alternating with darker erythrocyte-rich layer, can be distinguished with careful evaluation by naked eyes. And that is why it is designated mixed thrombus. Such thrombi with laminations can only develop in the setting of flowing blood. Thus, their presence can be utilized to distinguish ante-mortem thrombosis from the bland clots developing in post-mortem state. Thrombi can develop anywhere in the cardiovascular system, for example, in cardiac chambers, on wall cusps, in arterial system, in veins, or in capillaries. The shape and size of thrombi depends on both their site of origin and the cause. No matter where the thrombosis occurs, if the patient survives the initial thrombosis, in the ensuing days, the thrombi will undergo one of the following phases: propagation, embolization, dissolution, organization, and recanalization. Propagation means that where accumulation of more platelet and fibrin, the thrombi grow into larger ones. Embolization refers to the dislodgement of thrombi from the site of origin and being transported to elsewhere. If the thrombi are removed by fibrinolytic activity, the process is called dissolution. Generally speaking, recent fresh thrombi are more vulnerable to be dissolved, and the old thrombi tend to undergo organization, in which process endothelial cell and fibroblasts grow into the thrombi and eventually generate fibrin-rich clots. If there are conduit formed along the thrombi, which leads to the re-establishment of flow to some degree, it is called recanalization. Depending on the site of origin, thrombosis have different effects. Arterial thrombi can embolize and even cause the infarction of downstream tissues. In addition, vascular obstruction caused by coronary and cerebral arterial thrombi can lead to myocardial infarction and cerebral infarction respectively, which is clinically significant. On the contrary, obstruction caused by venous thrombi rarely leads to infarction, but rather likely cause congestion and edema in vascular beds distal to the obstruction. What is more dangerous? The dislodgement of venous thrombi has the potential to cause pulmonary thromboembolism and even cause death eventually.